Hi there. In this week's edition of The Wrap, we're looking at the growing global call to stop punishing South Africa for identifying the Omicron variant. We celebrate Barbados' newest royal, Rihanna, and take you through a whirlwind tour of the year that was in the news headlines. So, let's dive into your weekly update of empowering and easy to understand news brought to you by myself, Verashni Pillay, and the Explain.coza team. Our take. World AIDS Day. We've come a long way. We've spent a lot of time in the past 2 years celebrating scientific advances and championing brilliant, hard-working scientists. But it's easy to lose sight of just how much difference science can make over time. That's why it's worth pausing to reflect on World AIDS Day, which was marked yesterday, as it is each December 1st. This year's theme was Ending the HIV Epidemic, Equitable Access, Everyone's Voice. Now, there was a time when people would not have believed that there even could be an end to the AIDS epidemic. Since the virus was first identified a little over 30 years ago, UNAIDS estimates that around 36.3 million people have died from AIDS-related illnesses. For years, being diagnosed as HIV positive effectively meant receiving a death sentence. Many South Africans will remember the denialism and bad science that marked government policy during Thabo Mbeki's presidency, costing hundreds of thousands of lives, if not more. Now, the past decade or so have brought fundamental shifts in how South Africa and other countries manage HIV and AIDS. Massive strides in treatment means that this year's theme was not entirely wishful thinking, i.e., ending the epidemic. For starters, antiretroviral or ARV treatments are more accessible than ever. Some come in the form of a pill which, if taken daily, stops HIV from copying itself or spreading in the body. This also reduces the chances of it spreading to others. And, as we've reported before, researchers say a bi-monthly injection containing the ARV drug, which I'm not going to try to pronounce, is highly effective in preventing HIV, especially in women. A similar injection was recently developed in the UK. Now, the conversation is also reporting that the oral use of pre-exposure prophylaxis, otherwise known as PrEP, which is a daily preventative medication, is increasing among pregnant and breastfeeding women in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly in Kenya. Pharmaceutical companies are also finding new ways to make ARVs more palatable for kids. Things are a little more complex on the vaccine front. The HI virus changes so fast that it's tough for scientists to develop a fully effective vaccine. You see, HIV is very different to COVID-19 because it goes straight for the immune system. So the methods used to fast-track COVID vaccines can't simply be copied when it comes to HIV. Still, researchers are hard at work, and several vaccines that are currently underway are still being investigated. This year, the University of Oxford and several African partner institutions kickstarted the HIV Core 0052 trial, which sounds vaguely like Harry Potter's enchanted broom, but it's actually a clinical trial in Zambia. It will also be rolled out in Uganda and Kenya, testing out the efficiency or the efficacy of a potential vaccine. There's still a lot of work ahead. South Africa has the largest number of people living with HIV/AIDS in the world, the conversation reported. But given the astonishing changes we've seen in the last decade, there's little doubt that scientists are up to the task. Now that's something worth celebrating. Onto your big story, Omni who? Like other South Africans, your head is probably spinning with the news of the Omicron variant. It happened so quickly, and before we knew it, plans to see loved ones from abroad after years of separation were cruelly halted as many in the developed world, like Britain, quickly hit us with shock travel bans. We'll get on to what you need to know about this new variant in a bit, but first, we have to join other global experts in calling out the absurdity and plain racism of the reaction to South Africa. Our brilliant scientists first detected the variant using advanced gene sequencing. This method analyzes the differences between sequences. Multiple differences may result in a new variant. Instead of being hailed for our scientists' acuity, the country was blamed as the variant's origin, which might not be the case. New evidence shows the variant appeared in the Netherlands and other parts of Europe, including Scotland, around the 20th of November, nearly a week before it was detected here in South Africa. The Guardian has reported. The variant is now present in more than 20 countries, the World Health Organization announced, including many European countries. So why put South Africa in the naughty corner? Is it because we were transparent about our findings, because we're underdeveloped, or is it a blatant form of racism? The world's largely knee-jerk reaction has ruined plans for families long separated by the virus, leaving some travelers stranded at airports, and it has serious economic consequences. Tourism booms around this time of the year, so our economy will take a huge knock, and that's the last thing we need right now. Many outlets, including the New York Times and The Guardian in the UK, have noted that instead of punishing South Africa in a way that causes our economy to suffer, we should be rewarded, or at least thanked, for alerting the world to a potential new danger. Our talented, speedy, and honest scientists are the real stars here. As Jeffrey Barrett, leader of the Global COVID-19 Genomics Initiative, puts it, the teams in Africa who detected the new COVID genome moved quickly. Their actions should not result in economic loss. Now, what exactly is Omicron? Let's tell you what we know so far about this new variant. It's not a new transformer, but it is surfing the upcoming fourth wave in South Africa. As we told you last week, Omicron has a high rate of mutations. That means it changes quickly, so it's tough for scientists to get a handle on its effects. But so far, here's what the experts know and what they don't. Firstly, it's different. As one group of South African scientists puts it, it does not seem to be a daughter of Delta or a grandson of Beta. Instead, it represents a new lineage of SARS-CoV-2, as if we needed more of that. Scientists are yet to understand its transmissibility and severity, but Chairman of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on Vaccines in South Africa, Barry Schroep, said that cases so far have been mild to moderate. Lastly, it is not yet clear whether the variant will evade the vaccine. The Delta variant, which was dominant for a while, responded well to the vaccine. There is no evidence yet that a new vaccine will be needed, however. Scientists say vaccinations and non-pharmaceutical interventions like mask wearing and social distancing still work. So ultimately, don't panic and just do what you can to stay safe. Moving on to the rest of the news for this week in your briefs. Arise Rihanna, the Queen of a Free Barbados. For the rest of the so-called Commonwealth, like here in South Africa, Britain's colonial rule is a distant memory. Not so for the Eastern Caribbean island of Barbados, whose residents were technically under British rule for 396 years. That changed this week when, at the stroke of midnight on November 29th, Queen Elizabeth II's reign over Barbados came to an end. The nation is now an independent republic, and Dame Sandra Mason was sworn in as its first president in the capital city, Bridgetown. Barbadians, also called Bajans, say this means restoration of their identity and culture, and that the change was long overdue. The country's Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, who leads the government while the newly sworn-in president is more of a figurehead, announced the decision to cut ties with the monarchy last year, and now it is official. Wait though, it gets better. Bad girl Riri, otherwise known as Rihanna, was named a national hero of the country. She attended the presidential swearing-in ceremony sporting a stunning rust-colored dress and stole the show. The Guardian explains her new title is apt because since 2018 she's been the country's official ambassador for culture and youth. She's never softened her Barbadian accent, and her music has always been rich with her Caribbean heritage. Plus, she frequently channels her enormous wealth to benefit Barbados with emergency hurricane relief, healthcare, and education programs. We love the idea of this culturally rich island swapping out a colonial queen for its native one. On to Shell's plans. You may have heard about fuel company Shell's plans to send sound blasts through our ocean in search of oil and gas. The process was meant to start on Wednesday, despite an uproar among activists and ordinary citizens alike. It's particularly galling given that our government gave the go-ahead. The same government, mind you, that received billions during recent global climate talks to switch to green energy sources. The good news, however, is that 4 environmental and human rights organizations filed a last-minute court interdict against Shell's plans on Wednesday. The judge is expected to make a decision tomorrow. For its part, Shell insists that the process will not harm marine life. The method they're using is called a seismic survey and is used to collect information from formations below the Earth's surface using sound waves. This particular survey was to take place along the pristine wild coast in the Eastern Cape. Experts say the loud noises will impact all forms of life in the ocean, from plankton and coral to whales and dolphins, which use sound to navigate for food and communicate with each other. The Department of Mineral Resources approved Shell's plans in 2014, The Guardian reported. But that means very little now because the approval process is outdated, according to law firm Cullinan and Associates, who are representing the organizations fighting Shell. We trust the court to decide in favour of our precious marine life. After all, this won't be the first time activists have stepped in to defend the environment. In 2017, two South African activists took legal action against South Africa's infamous 76 billion rand nuclear Russia deal and won. That's the reason that deal's no longer going ahead. They were awarded the 2018 Goldman Environmental Prize for their efforts. So we're expecting the same energy, this time around too. Onto your adulting, yet another petrol price hike. We may not be locked down by the government, see more on COVID regulations in our next section, but yet another petrol price hike means many people are stuck at home anyway. The price of petrol increased again on Wednesday, the second time in less than a month. This time, petrol 95, 93 and diesel increased by 75 cents a litre. This effectively pushes the price of petrol above 20 rand a litre for the first time in Gauteng and inland provinces. So much for all those romantic long drives you had planned. Don't get mad at the government, though. It does not determine the petrol price. Instead, blame international oil prices and high taxes, worsened by a weaker rand. There was a slightly funny side to the latest price hike, however. The Department of Mineral Resources and Energy made a mistake in its initial announcement, overstating the increase, as if we haven't had enough bad news recently. While the petrol price still went up on Wednesday, it was not by 81 cents, as the department incorrectly first stated. The erroneous extra 6 cents was included for the adjustment of wages for service station workers, but this had already been implemented in September, so looks like someone's brain is out of petrol up there too. Onto vaccine mandates. There's very little middle ground when it comes to the issue of vaccine mandates, and that's the idea of you having to be vaccinated to access certain places. Some people fervently support the notion of having to be vaccinated, while others are fiercely opposed to it. It's a controversial topic, but one that's become increasingly urgent, as only about a quarter of South Africans are fully vaccinated, and vaccine hesitancy shows no sign of abating. During his latest address to the nation on Sunday evening to speak about the new variant, President Cyril Ramaphosa said his cabinet was considering making vaccines mandatory for specific locations and activities. Previously, he had said no one will be forced to take the vaccine, but with our economy on its knees and South Africans still not queuing for their vaccines, an intervention is needed. It may not be a speedy one. Ramaphosa has done his usual thing of appointing a task team, as usual, to undertake broad consultations, Mr. Consensus himself. Business leaders are also pushing for vaccines to become mandatory and showing that it works. Just 22% of staff at mega insurer Discovery were vaccinated voluntarily. The company implemented what seems to be a carefully considered mandatory vaccination policy. 3 months later, 94% of its staff were vaccinated. Still, this is not a simple matter. There are loads of legalities to consider and rights to balance, and there's bound to be pushback from those opposed to vaccines. In case you missed it from Sunday's meeting, we're still on adjusted lockdown level 1 following Ramaphosa's address. No new restrictions were introduced, so curfew is still between 12 a.m. and 4 a.m. Indoor gatherings are limited to 750 people, while outdoor gatherings are limited to 2,000 people. This will be reviewed in the week and is subject to change, so hang tight. Finally, on to some bad news, unfortunately. Joblessness has dramatically increased. The July unrest and COVID-19 really put South Africa's economy on the back foot. This is starkly evident in constantly rising unemployment numbers throughout the year. The latest stats show that joblessness reached its highest rate since Stats SA started reporting this data in 2008. It rose to nearly 35% in the third quarter from 34.4% in the second quarter. But under the expanded definition of unemployment, which includes discouraged job seekers, the unemployment rate increased to 46.6%, up from 44.2%. That's an over 2-point increase. That essentially means that almost half the population who are eligible for a job do not have one. Joblessness means two things. One is that the economy is not growing at a rate that enables it to absorb more workers. Two, it creates an increased risk of unrest and crime. Yes, it is depressing, but solutions do exist. Business Day reports there have been encouraging announcements that have the potential to drive higher rates of private sector investment in essential infrastructure in areas like electricity, ports, rail, and broadband, as well as more broadly in sectors such as mining. All of this would result in more jobs instead of the jobless economic recovery and growth we're currently experiencing. Look, talk is not yet action, and we'll be watching closely to see how the government and private sector deliver. Meanwhile, consider how you might be able to empower young people and support them to seek work and business opportunities. Finally, looking back at a year that made us say WTF. As we wind down and welcome December, we thought we'd grace you with a young throwback of the year that was. Where do we begin? January seems like the obvious place, and it smells a lot like deja vu. The second wave arrived after the December break and was accompanied by the Beta variant. We were blamed for that one too. News that vaccines were en route offered some comfort. We kicked off our vaccination program in February, beginning with our heroic and exhausted healthcare workers. Some South Africans sprained their tongues trying out Port Elizabeth's new name, Gqeberha. As you can see, I've been practicing it. Devastating fires broke out in parts of Cape Town. The ANC finally suspended former Secretary General Ace Magashule for refusing to step aside after being criminally charged for corruption. He responded by trying to suspend President Ramaphosa back. In a line that journalists have written approximately 11 million times in the past few years, former President Jacob Zuma kept evading justice and nudged our high school history class memories with his Stalingrad tactics. After more back and forth than you'll ever see at Wimbledon, Zuma was finally sentenced to 15 months in jail for contempt of court in June after avoiding the State Capture Commission. He was released on parole in October for medical reasons, but we're still smarting from the chaos that descended upon our nation when he was actually arrested in July. That difficult period was also a reminder that heroes live among us. We're talking about you, Nhlanhla Lux, one of many people who defended our country. Zweli Mkhize was forced to step down as health minister because of his involvement in the digital vibe saga. At some point, we learned that it's illegal to keep a tiger in your backyard, though we wouldn't recommend that you try it. Then elections rolled around and heads rolled, metaphorically, we're glad to say. The ANC took a real beating and lost several metros. Action SA's Herman Mashaba and the EFF's Judith Malema staged their own version of the Netflix hit The Queen's Gambit by voting DA candidates into power in key cities. This surprised everyone, including the Blue Party, who are now beholden to them. Despite the difficulties, we're making our way out, just like the huge container ship that was wedged in the Suez Canal for a couple of days. Yep, that was this year. Now, if only Eskom could keep the lights on consistently. Elsewhere in the world, the Olympics came and went, Facebook broke and then metastasized like a cancer, and Bill Gates got divorced and Donald Trump was finally booted from office. Two rich guys raced to space and R. Kelly was finally convicted of sex crimes. The list goes on, and we could too, but we'll pause here to give you the breathing room this year was too rude to provide. Look out for our other reviews in the coming weeks. That's it from us at The Wrap, an award-winning product of Explained at COSA. Simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love, tell your friends to sign up for the updates at explained@cosa.com/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from the team.